Welcome to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast, where we cover anything related to behavior change that will increase your long-term wellness and happiness. And now, here are your hosts, personal trainer and RNs, Matt and Jenna.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Matt.
And my name's Jenna.
We are the host of this here podcast, the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. This podcast is all about implementing behavior change for your long-term wellness and happiness. Having said that, we want to implement things that will bring you value, that will help with things that are not just fitness related. And that's today's topic. Today we're talking about $30,000 of debt and how we got out of it in a year and a half. Before we dive into the actual show itself, we wanted to say, for the launch of this podcast, 8 weeks after that, if you leave a review on iTunes and send me an email at mattlanefitness@gmail.com, we're going to return that email with a free Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast t-shirt. We're very excited about this launch. Thank you for being here. Your support means so much. Now that we're done with the plug, let's jump in to the podcast. Jenna, how you feeling over there?
Feeling good. This is a subject that is something that, is very personal to us. It's us sharing our personal story of how we got into and out of debt and how bad decisions we turned around into good decisions, and it was really worth it.
Yeah. And before we get into it, one last thing. We want to hit you with our gratitude point. I'm looking at Jenna's face and I'm thinking that she might not have had one in her head yet, but
yeah, you go first.
So recently I had a bit of a knee injury and it's since healed. It didn't heal itself. I riced it. I did rice, come on, Matt. Rest, ice, compression, elevation. And sure enough, the knee is doing just fine. And I'm just happy to have functioning knees. Thinking about, I'm only 29 years old right now. I know there's going to come a day where I may have knee problems. So I'm very happy to have functioning knees as of right now. By the way, if this is your first episode, this gratitude point is something that we come up with off the spot, off the top of our head, something that we're grateful for. We feel that it gives us perspective to take a point and be grateful for something each day. It gives you perspective to see, if you're having a rough day, man, things aren't that bad when you have functioning knees or whatever it may be. So I encourage you to dig and see, what are you grateful for today? Speaking of, Jenna, hit them with it.
So this morning, I was able to sleep in a little bit. And when I woke up, there were magically pancakes ready for me to eat.
You're welcome.
And, I think the point there is that every once in a while, it's worth sleeping in a little bit, and I thank you, Matt, for letting me sleep in and for magically making those pancakes appear when I woke up.
So gratitude of pancakes and sleep. Yes. Yeah, I think even the small things can be more impactful than the big things at times. I just love that. I love that. All right, so on this podcast, whenever we have a topic, we want to bring you value. We want to bring you points that you can take away. So Jenna and I were talking about this concept before we hopped on the mics, and I said, why don't we give actual numbers that were actually ours? Because I feel like it gets lost in translation when you don't know the numbers. Somebody can tell you a story about how they got in and out of $30,000 of debt, and they can tell you, well, we did this, we did that, but until you hear like the actual numbers behind it, it loses some translation. So I wanted to be completely transparent. So does Jenna. So we're going to throw it out there.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to quantify it rather than just saying we started putting money in savings.
Yeah.
Well, how much? $5 versus whatever. It makes more sense to give real numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I got nothing to hide. So
yeah.
So give them a time frame of when this actually was.
It was about 3 years ago.
So 2016.
Or 3.5 years ago, yeah.
Okay.
So in that time frame, Matt had been out of nursing school and working for about a year. And I had been, working as a nurse for about 10 years at that point. So we had accumulated a little bit of debt with Matt not working full time while he was in nursing school. But most of the accumulation was just from spending stuff on things that weren't immediately important to spend money on. And I think that's important to realize. We weren't tracking our finances. So really we weren't looking at money in versus money out. And we had no idea really what we were spending our money on. It's just at the end of the month, we had nothing left. So we were putting it on credit cards and taking out loans. And it was a snowball effect where we didn't accumulate it overnight. It was over several years, but it added up to the point of I was having to work extra, and so was Matt, just to pay the bills, not to be enjoying our time. And that really added up to we were not enjoying any of this working extra because we were just trying to pay the bills.
Yeah, and I remember looking back when we were sort of on the path of getting out of this $30,000 of debt. But I remember looking back and thinking, like, what were we just doing? Like, we weren't going on trips all the time, and we didn't have a bunch of shiny new things that I could remember that were just so monumental. Like, there was not like a significant life improvement for when we were spending all this money. Like, I honestly can't remember many things that we spent this money on that I'm like, oh yeah, well that was worth it because we had memories out of it. It wasn't memories, it was just stuff.
Yeah. And I think we were in that mindset where a lot of people are, where whatever money you have in the bank, like, well, what can I spend that amount on, and then spend it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It wasn't something that was monumental or memorable or even really tangible. It was just, okay, I have $10 to spend. What can I spend all $10 on right now?
Yeah, we had zero thought of, all right, we have $10. How can we make each one of these dollars be our employee and work for us, or, put away for a rainy day, or whatever you want to say. But we had such a different mindset. And I remember what started this was, I have a good friend, Andrew Martin, who is also our financial advisor. He is the one that truly got us on this path. And if you heard episodes before, we had an episode with him on talking about finances and all that. But this is sort of a continuation, because I felt that we didn't want to go too deep in with Andrew about our personal, because I didn't want to make it so centric about us. But this episode's different. Well, let's talk all about us. So that's, So Andrew, thank you. If you're listening, buddy, we really appreciate you getting us on the right path. I look at him as our personal trainer of finance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point, we were in a lot of debt, and, we were very unhappy with our finances, and, every penny that was coming in was going out.
Yeah.
We had no savings. I was drowning in, high interest credit card debt.
Yeah.
And Matt comes to me one day and says, I made an appointment with a financial advisor. And I was like, you've got to be kidding, right? Like,
yeah. How can we afford that?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but we went through, it was honestly very humbling.
It was.
To say out loud to someone who is a professional of why we're in this debt and what we spent this money on, and how embarrassing it was to just say out loud, like, I spent this much money on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And now I can't pay my bills.
You're right. It was humbling, or it was having humility to sit down and be like, all right, this is what I've been doing.
Right.
And we wanted to, like we said earlier, we wanted to give actual tangible steps that we took. And I think the very first thing that we started doing was, we went to Andrew Martin, but the first thing that he had us start doing was figuring out how much money is coming in and how much money is going out.
Yep.
So we literally sat down and figured out, all right, we get this much money per 2 weeks, per month, whatever. And then we figured out every single bill that we have. And then whatever wasn't a bill was, if it wasn't necessary spending, it was frivolous.
Right. So we cut the fat.
We cut the fat 1,000%. And I always make the translation, and I did in that podcast with Andrew Martin, that this is the same thing as, if you're trying to lose weight or gain weight, or lose fat, or gain fat for whatever reason you might do that.
Or gain muscle.
There it is. My brain was going a little fast there. It's the same concept of knowing how many calories are coming in and how many calories are going out. It's the same. It's budgeting.
Right.
That's all it is.
Yep, absolutely. So we did that, and there were quite a few things that on the outside, when we were like, oh my gosh, yeah, we need that. We need this. We need that.
Yeah.
I think a perfect example was our massage envy.
That just makes me embarrassed to say on these mics right now, but it's true. It's true.
You know, the idea behind getting that membership was a good idea. We wanted to do couples massages. That was something that we thought would be important to spend time with,
how
together.
First world is this to say that right now? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
But then we got busy, and to have a couples massage, you both need to have time available to go make this appointment. And we kept just not making our appointments. So we had all these credits that we had paid for. We weren't going. So the point of spending that much money every month for 2 memberships was ridiculous.
And you know what? I even remember thinking in that moment, because we were working so much, that we had those credits. We could have gone, but there was a tip involved.
Right.
I remember that being the specific point, that I didn't want to go in there and not tip that massage therapist or masseuse, whatever you want to call them. And that was the tipping point for me. I was like, I just didn't want to tip them. And I didn't, it wasn't that I didn't want to tip them, it was that I knew I shouldn't be tipping them. Once we started really looking at it. And so that was the first thing we started doing, really looking at the expenses. So the massage envy, I remember we got rid of cable. Mm-hmm. And I remember that saying it out loud just sounded preposterous. Having access to cable is such a basic thing here in the States, but we haven't had cable since. I think we've been without cable now for
like 3 years.
I feel like it's been longer than that.
Yeah,
at least
it feels
3
like
years.
A long time. Yeah. And I thought it sounded so preposterous, and I was actually pretty frustrated with you about that one.
I went on a rampage, and there's something that I do whenever my head or my heart gets set on something, and like I'm all in. If my heart is in it, I am all in. And regardless of what anybody thinks about me or how they look at me, that's just who I am, how I am. I guess it's obsessive, really. And that's what it was.
Yeah. So we went through, looked at absolutely everything. We wrote down what you were spending your money on, Matt, what I was spending my money on, how much money we were making every month, and really put it down on paper and looked at what is absolutely necessary and what isn't. What can we cut, because we're drowning here. We can't. This isn't sustainable.
I'm glad you brought that up. We did put it on paper. I have found through journaling and all my things that I do for mental health, mental wellness, that putting it on paper makes it so much more real than just being like, all right, we got to spend this much this month, or we can't buy Taco Bell.
Right. Right. It makes you more accountable too. Mm-hmm. And then when you get into that, when you're a couple weeks out and you forget all these bullet points, or you get into that tough spot of really sticking to it, you can go back to what's written down and realize, oh, this is why. Yeah. You can, recenter yourself.
It's easy to get sidetracked.
Yeah. And reorient yourself to that goal. But if it's just in your head, when you get into that pinch and you're like, I want to quit, or why am I doing this? If it's not on paper, you tend to really forget what that goal is and stray away from your goals.
Yeah. Once we were able to stop that bleeding, I think the next thing that Andrew had us focus on was paying ourselves first. And I remember Andrew telling us that, and I thought it was such a strange concept. I thought
Agreed.
It was, I remember it, my initial feeling was, that's selfish. I remember thinking that's selfish. I guess because, you're always told you need to pay your bills before you do anything. You better pay your bills. And I'm not saying we excluded our bills ever. Absolutely. Of course, pay your bills. Whatever your responsibility, pay it, but pay yourself first.
Right. And so it goes back to the budgeting of how much is coming in and how much is going out, and figuring out a realistic amount that you're going to pay yourself first. Not, I'm going to pay myself half of my paycheck and then the rest I'm just going to have to figure out with my bills. Mm-hmm. No, the reason why we chose the number that we did to put into savings every month was based on our budget. So that money was realistically available to pay ourselves and still pay our bills. And I think another point that Andrew made that was just a total aha moment to me was I had maxed out this high interest credit card, and I was just throwing every penny that I had at this credit card, every penny.
Do you remember what the rate was?
It was like 23%. Like my minimum payment was like $400. $200 of that was going to interest every month or something crazy. Like more than half of my payment every month was going to interest, which was just
makes you want to vomit. That makes me want to vomit.
Yes. So I was telling him, I'm putting every penny that I've got towards this credit card. And he asked the question back, well, what if something happens to your house, for example, and you need to pay for that? How would you pay for it? And I was like, well, I guess I'll have to put it back on my credit card. And he was like, well, does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, that's why you need to make an emergency savings while you're trying to pay your debt down, so you don't reaccumulate debt, because at some point something's going to happen and you're going to need to spend that money. Don't let your credit card be your emergency savings if you can help it.
Right. And so the next point that, she's making there is the emergency fund. Before we go on to that, I just want to say so when we're talking about paying ourselves first, that was to set a precedence and say, look, this is the money that we're going to have to save. We're going to have to accomplish the goals that we want. And literally every 2 weeks, we took $500 and threw it into savings. For whatever the goal was. And, what that $500 every 2 weeks was to work toward this emergency fund. If you don't know what an emergency fund is, it's 3 to 6 months worth of the income that you have. So let's say you lost your job or whatever, you would have that to pay your bills. By the way, I don't think I mentioned it at the top. We are not financial advisors at all. So please don't take this blindly. Do your own homework. This is our experience. Our
story.
Yeah. This is what happened with us.
So, and I think it makes it more tangible for those of you listening to know our story, rather than us just giving you blanket advice, to really know real stories with real struggles and real examples of how we got ourselves out of our debt. Yeah,
exactly. And so I remember him saying 3 to 6 months worth of income, and I just thought to myself, what? Like, you look at that as such a mountain, because if you add up what your income is, or how much your bills are, or what you have to have per month to live, you add that up and you're like 3 to 6 months. How is that possible? But it's just baby steps. It's making sure that every 2 weeks or every month you have thrown aside what you need to throw aside to accomplish the goal. And it took a year and a half to accomplish all this, but when we got to that point, it was an amazing feeling. But in the middle of it, it was really tough, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was really tough.
Yeah. And it helped that we were both on the same page, because we kept each other accountable.
Yeah.
When, one of us was struggling, most often the other one of us, stayed strong, because it was really difficult to really put our noses down and not go waste money, even just a couple of dollars here and there.
Absolutely.
That's right. During the time where we really got serious about meal prepping too. And I know Matt started meal prepping because he wanted to account for his calories and protein and all that. I got on board with meal prepping when I couldn't afford to keep buying fast food on the way home every day.
And for reference, this really started in the end of 2014, the start of 2015. So I was fairly new to it, but in 2014, you might have heard me tell this story before. 2014, I did all the grocery shopping, added up the grocery shopping. And in 2014, we spent $14,000, give or take. And that's going out, getting drinks, getting Bertolli meals, getting fast food, all that, $14,000 in 1 year. The following year, 2015, at the end, I had started meal prepping in January. In December, I added up everything, and it was about $7,000. That was pretty much including everything, going out and all that. Now, granted, we were neurotic about, not going out frivolously. And it's not to say that we never did, but it was really, really precise on when we would. It was an occasion. It was, we turned down a lot of invites because we were so focused on the goal. But that major point of seeing a $7,000 swing just by cooking at home, that's huge.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That is a major raise for someone.
Right. And, when we did go out, it was just being more conscious of, rather than getting 3 glasses of wine, I would just get water. Rather than each of us getting an appetizer, we just each got an entree. We didn't get dessert, or, we still went out. We still spent time with friends. And you know what? If you don't get all of those things, you can still have a good time.
Yeah.
And like the food that you eat isn't making the evening great.
No. And we do that still, actually.
Yeah.
I'm maybe a little more neurotic than I should be, but
you're definitely more neurotic than I am.
yeah. So there's a
about a lot of things.
There's a little bit of balance you got to have there. And luckily I have Jenna for that. But another point that we realized was at that point, you had some credit card debt on top of everything that we had, like, that we were talking about, but you switched it to a no interest credit card.
Yes. So that was one thing that Andrew encouraged us to do, is to find a no interest or low interest credit card. That way I can stop throwing half of my payment every month out the window to interest. And quite honestly, my credit at that point was not great, and I had a difficult time finding a credit card company that would take
I didn't realize that.
all of that debt. So I had to split it up into 2 credit cards.
I don't remember that. That's crazy.
Yep.
Okay. Nice. Well,
Yeah.
that's another point in itself right there. So if you can't get the amount that you need on one credit card, just getting 2, with a no interest. And the viewer, I'm a YouTuber as well. So check out Matt Lane Fitness on YouTube, but I'm still trying to break this viewer, the listener, that you get a statement about a credit card saying, hey, for the next 85 months, you ain't got to pay any interest, just spend X amount of dollars. So, utilizing that and then making sure you're sticking to the goal. And that's exactly what you did, Jenna.
Right. Yeah. And we were very focused on it. We put everything down on paper. We watched our bank accounts very closely. And that really helped us keep on track, was seeing, the debt go down slowly and the emergency savings going up. It really helped us keep on track. Matt got in the habit of asking me, because our emergency savings was in one of my accounts. So he would ask me every payday, how much is in our emergency savings? How much is in our emergency savings? And that really kept us on track of, we really saw the debt dropping and our emergency fund increasing. And that really helped us keep on track rather than us not paying attention to the numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, 1,000%. And like you were saying earlier, as far as we had a cohesive team effort to knock out $30,000 worth of debt. I mean, had you not been on board, had I not been on board, if one of us would have been a little more into it, then it would not have worked. We both had to be fully in, and I'm unbelievably grateful for you for putting your nose to the grindstone, because, it was a big shift for both of us.
Yeah, it was, I think, the biggest shift for me, because how I've always been focused on is stuff and accumulating stuff and spending every penny that I have plus some. So, you really helping coach me on this random thing sitting in the living room that cost you X amount of dollars. What does it really mean to you?
That's a good point. I forgot about that until you just said that. Yeah.
So, there was one day we watched a documentary on minimalism, and I looked at Matt and I said, there's nothing in this house that's, extra. We don't have all this stuff sitting around that doesn't mean anything. And he was like, you've got to be kidding, right? There's so much stuff in this house that isn't sentimental. So I challenged him. I'm like, well, go find something that you think is not essential to our house. And he came back with some random thing that was sitting somewhere.
I think it was a statue of a dog or something.
Yeah.
Because we have 3 dogs. We love them to death. But it wasn't like an American Bulldog replica of our dog. It wasn't handed to us from one of our grandparents. It meant nothing. It was just something we saw. I'm like, oh, that's cute. We got dogs too. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think it was just a big light bulb that came on. Just this simple thing of him going and being like, what does this mean to you? And me realizing, well, nothing, but that was probably $20 that we just threw away for a statue that I have to dust every other week.
Well, and I was just sitting here thinking, the beautiful thing about a partnership for this is that I have the ability to keep you accountable. And I've never had a problem coming to you and being like, hey, this is not benefiting you. This is not correct. This is not good for you. Because I love you. And anybody in my circle, if I give a crap about you, I'll tell you the truth.
Yep.
If I do not like you, I'll tell you I'll tell you the opposite. I'll say, oh, I feel you, or I got you. Oh, yeah, I get it. Like, the people around you, you should be honest with everybody, but the people around you, if they truly love you, they'll tell you the truth. So if you have a partner and you're kind of struggling with this concept, I would put it gently, of course, put it, in a way that they'll receive it best, but be honest, and what this boils down to, I think, is throughout this process, we realized we were entitled as hell. We had such a sense of like, well, I deserve this. We worked hard. We're working extra, so we deserve the food or what the hell ever.
Yeah, and we got into this mindset that I worked really hard, so I deserve this. Well, in reality, we worked really hard because we're in debt and we needed to work extra or work harder to pay for our debt. So it was the cycle of, we work extra to pay for something and then we feel like we deserve a reward. So then we waste our money on the reward that was really meant to go towards paying something off. And I think that's a common problem with a lot of people that you don't even realize you're doing it. And I think that's part of it. And this is an off subject too, but it's part of why I gained so much weight during that time. Is because it was a sense of I'm working really hard and I'm stressed out, so I deserve that fast food or I deserve that ice cream. And, that's the snowball effect.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you don't deserve a reward, but make it something that's useful and not hurtful.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, so the entitlement, I didn't realize that going into this financial plan. I just thought it was like, we just got to figure out numbers. And that's the whole point of this topic, was it boiled down to behavior change. The only reason we accomplished this is because we looked at it just so differently. And how we look at money now as compared to how we looked at it then is just so different. It's because of the behavior that we changed with ourselves. We had nobody to blame but ourselves.
Yeah. And I think, I didn't grow up being conscious of finances. So finances have always been just this monumental thing that I'm never going to be able to get, wrap my mind around. Mm-hmm. So you coming to me and saying we need to get our finances in order was just overwhelming to think about. But when we broke it down, it's really pretty simple. And I think that's a great place to start, is just breaking it down to step by step how I'm going to get from point A to point B. And that's really where Andrew helped. And I think that's why you go to a financial advisor. It's the same thing of why you go to a personal trainer. You don't wait till you're strong and gained your muscle or lost your weight or whatever your goals are to go to a personal trainer. Yeah. You go to a personal trainer when you have a goal that you need help accomplishing.
Exactly. And I think that... I know a lot of self-awareness was built in this. A lot of self-awareness was built that it took time to step back and realize, oh, wait a minute, I was the problem this whole time. It wasn't just circumstantial. It wasn't,
right.
It was figuring out that entitlement. The reason we figured out the entitlement was because we started creating self-awareness. And the way that I found best to do that, and still am finding best to do that, is to educate yourself. It's the first book that has changed my life that I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I read it, and then I had Jenna read it, and that book completely 180'd my mindset on money.
Yep.
I highly encourage you to read it. You can get the audiobook because that's what I did. Just the way Robert Kiyosaki goes about it, it's truly a way to create financial freedom for yourself. Before we wrap things up, there was one more thing that was involved in this that I think would benefit you guys. I want to ask you specifically, putting you on the spot, Jenna, your history of your mindset of stuff. So like, think about back to that point of how you thought about stuff as to how you think about stuff now. And like, okay, we have the money, so I want to buy X. And as compared to now, do you feel like it's different?
Yeah, absolutely. So before we went through this transformation, my focus was always on, I think, what other people thought of what I had. And once I stopped trying to keep up with the Joneses and stopped trying to impress people with the stuff that I had, when I realized that my coworkers know how much money I make because they make the same amount. So if I'm going up,
why are you trying to ball out? Right.
Like if I'm showing up with this super expensive purse or whatever, they know how much money I make. It's not like they're thinking, oh my gosh, she must make so much money. What they probably are thinking is how much is on her credit card, or, you know, I'm not impressing anybody with my handbag.
Why do you, and tell me, I'm digging in here. Why do you think it is that you had to get that stuff for them? Like, what was the reason behind that?
I think maybe just growing up, and that's always been my mindset. Even when I was a kid, you know, like I had to have, you know, the popular girl had these tennis shoes, so I needed to go get those to be the cool kid too.
So do you think it was acceptance from the jump?
Acceptance, yeah, and
confidence,
you know, impressing other people, rather than having people relate to me on a personal level. It was what they thought of me from a distance.
Okay, yeah. You feel like it's different now than a few years ago, as far as like how you, because I remember it being much different. I can see the difference even still, that, you know, back in the day you were much more worried about what other people thought as compared to now. Do you think it was the actual process that you went through with changing this money, or do you think it was your fitness that changed that? And we're getting a little off topic here, but I think it still applies. Like this behavior change and self-awareness created this $30,000 that we knocked out.
Yeah, I think it was the transformation of doing things for other people to doing something for me.
Boom.
So now if I buy something, it's because it's for me. It's something that's going to make me happy. Or even if it's a pair of pants or a necklace, or, you know, I'm not spending the money so that, you know, person X over here thinks that I'm cool because I have this flashy new necklace.
Yeah.
You know, I'm buying it because I like it. And that's changed my style. It's changed how I feel about myself because I'm not wearing it for you. I'm wearing it for me.
Right.
Because I'm not doing things for other people anymore. I'm doing things because it's what I want to do. And that's changed how I spend my money. It's changed how I look at myself, and it's changed why I do things. And that's really helped us stay out of debt.
Yeah. And you've done an incredible job. You've grown so much. I've been able to watch it. And I don't say that as like a weird, like, oh, good job, you're now where I am. That's definitely not what it is, but it's been cool to see you grow.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have, you know, been caught dead, you know, driving a 10-year-old car that's got dings and scratches on it. But now, guess what? I pay $0 a month for that. And that's worth so much more than having a car payment. You know, those extra couple $100s a month I can put towards going on vacation, or, you know, doing something else that provides happiness for both of us.
Yeah.
Rather than impressing some random person on the street with my flashy car.
The amount of freedom that I feel and that I felt initially when we hit our initial goal of having $10,000 in our emergency savings, when we hit that, first of all, I was dumbfounded. I was dumbfounded to know that we had that sitting aside, which in reality, it's really not that much money. I know it sounds like a preposterous amount of money, but it's really not that much money. But I just remember being so dumbfounded in the amount of comfort that I had to know that if stuff hits the fan, like, we prepared for it.
Yep.
And that's just, there's nothing that can replace that. And I'm not saying that you need to hit 10 grand or you need to be wherever we are. Whatever your financial picture is, put it in scale to you. You know, I mean, everybody has their own different income and outgoing and all that. So figure out what it is for you.
Yeah. And I think another point there is that we're speaking to our experience. By no means does that mean that we're perfect.
Absolutely not.
We've struggled a lot with this. I think that's something that I'm never going to be perfect at because I love spending money, but I spend it in a different way now, and it's much more controlled.
It is.
Than it used to be.
It really is.
You know, we have that emergency savings. We have other savings accounts too. I stay within my budget. I don't, just put it all on a credit card and then I don't know how to pay it off.
Yeah.
So while I still spend a portion of my money on things that aren't absolutely essential, I don't get crazy with it and I don't go overboard.
Exactly. Well, I think we beat this drum enough, unless you got any other closing remarks.
I think that's it. Just, break it down, take it step by step, seek some counsel. If you don't have a financial advisor that you feel comfortable going to, listen to some podcasts, read about it. There's an infinite amount of information at your fingertips all the time.
There is.
Use it.
There is a guy on YouTube, as of the recording of this in 2019, what's today? August 6, 2019. His name is Graham Stephan, Graham Stephan, Stephan. Awesome financial YouTuber. I've learned quite a bit from him. So what we're doing now is we're sort of in like a second phase of our financial picture and what we're doing. So we're still working towards stuff. We're still working on an emergency fund, and it's just different goals now. And he is an incredible source for that. So rather than beating this thing to death, thank you guys so much for being here. We truly hope that you gained value from this. We hope there are pieces of this that you can use for yourself from our experiences.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for listening to our stories.
Thank y'all so much. We'll see you next week. Talk to you next week. One of those.
This has been the Better Than Yesterday Everyday Podcast. We want to thank you for listening and invite you to subscribe to the show as well. And follow Matt Lane Fitness on YouTube. Until next time, you don't have to be perfect. Just be better than yesterday every day.